When the home was done and the landscape was in and we mowed the lawn the first time, I was walking around the house and I had stood in different positions that I hadn't, because there was no reason to stand there during construction. For the first time, I appreciated the home for what it was as a whole, rather than appreciating the little moments and the little wins and the little details that we had forged to get here. Building a modern home in an otherwise traditional neighborhood in a way that would respect not just the neighborhood, but also the familiar materials and overall architecture of this area was always going to be a challenge. So every decision that we made on the outside had to lean into that challenge in a way that we knew would be successful. This is the exterior of our 45 White Oak project. Going all the way back to the structure of the home was panelized and put together and stood up and actually weather tight in just about 2 months. From that point, you would typically see the siding start going up, exterior trim going on, and it would move fairly quickly. But our wall system was going to be more complicated than that. Once we were weather tight, we actually installed 5 inches of exterior insulation on the wall and 8 inches on the roof. And all of that was the Rockwool comfort board. So it's a semi-rigid insulation that had to be installed on the entire envelope of the home. The benefit of using a Rockwool comfort board is it's hydrophobic. If and when water makes its way through the shingles, it actually can roll down the face of the Rockwool all the way down to the open air gap at the bottom of our wall. It's really complicated to install that product because on one hand, you're just trying to get it on the building in a way that will wrap the building kind of like a sweater to keep the home warm, but we also needed to make sure that we understood where the structure lied behind it. There's about 40,000 pounds of brick on the home, and that needs to be tied back to our structure itself. So once the insulation was installed, we had these vertical 2x4s that had these structural screws that would drill through the insulation and hit the individual studs on the wall, and then the rafters on the roof. That essentially gave us our airspace for our rain screen. After that, we needed a way to attach the cover brick. That would require us to have a horizontal batten. We actually took a 2x4, cut it directly in half, but with a bevel on it. And that bevel matched the way that the shingle would hang. It's not necessarily required, it just made it a nicer install and felt as though the shingles were really meant to be on that horizontal batten. Now they're about 13 pounds a piece, so in theory they could just self-support and never be an issue, but we end up adding 2 screws for each shingle. When you look at the coursing of the shingles on the sidewall, you'll notice that everything is aligned with the tops and bottoms of windows and doors, and even the windowsills themselves. The windowsills are installed with a pitch so water runs out, but they always come down and align with the tops and bottoms of shingles. We knew this was going to be more complicated and more expensive to do. When we look back on those conversations now, when the home is done, we really can't envision it any other way. The home is what it is because we really committed to those details. We committed to doing it the more difficult way because it felt right. This is what the home deserves. The stainless steel was an interesting conversation because we understood what we wanted to accomplish with the mitered corners. We ultimately thought early on that adding a piece of metal would help simplify the mitering on the corners, which in some ways it might have, but in other ways, we added the complexity of adding another material and bending this trim detail. So the stainless steel was the design intent early on because you have stainless throughout the home, but we looked at it from a cost perspective and tried to understand, what is the most cost-effective way to do this today but also long-term, something that's gonna hold up. And we ultimately worked with Weiss Sheet Metal out of Avon, and they were able to source a mill-finish stainless steel that had a plastic protective coating on it. They worked with us really closely because every single corner, every fin, every windowsill, even the gutter caps, everything was custom made to our order. And Patrick on our team, worked tirelessly at every corner and every detail to figure out what those dimensions were and how everything was going to fit. One of the things that we had to also work through was our hose bibs. We had hose bibs around the home, and we didn't want just a typical hose bib. And we also knew that it was going to be challenging to install something on top of this brick. We ended up making these custom plates out of stainless steel, and we installed the Aqua hose bibs. And Aqua hose bibs are our standard. They're really a much more elevated looking product, but they're also a higher performing product. Stainless steel has much better frost protection. It also has an automatic drain down, so when you're not using it, it's not sitting there with water right behind the stop. It's actually draining all of the water out of the unit and basically keeping the unit frost protected at all times. The cover closes, sits on that custom stainless steel block, and just feels far more considered, even for an item as simple as a hose bib. At the top of the wall, you have this stainless steel cap around almost the entirety of the home. And behind that is a gutter. And we actually worked with DuraGutter on this specifically because of their extruded aluminum profile. And we didn't want to put a traditional gutter system or a traditional sheet metal gutter. We wanted this more robust, essentially hidden gutter. That gutter actually sits on the very top of that insulation layer. You actually don't see any of the gutters in the home. You just see the stainless steel cap that caps the shingle. And all of our rain leaders or our downspouts are buried within that 5 inches of insulation on the outside. We're able to not only capture, but then discharge all of the rain down into our perimeter drainage. We have a 36-inch band of stone around the entire home. You never see any of the downspouts. Everything is completely hidden, out of sight, out of mind. The window jambs on the second floor and the door jambs on the first floor was an area of conversation early on that, does it really make sense to return them with shingle, or should we do a large extension jamb out of sheet metal, stainless steel, or even wood? We considered that and just realized that this was our opportunity to create from the inside of the home would be this really special moment where you'd stand on the inside and see your plaster wall kind of die into the glass and then immediately turn into the brick on the outside. Anytime that we were interrupting the exterior, we really committed to it's either going to be brick or it's going to be this stainless steel. And having a partner like Weiss, they really helped work through the most efficient way to do this. We really took that to the highest level. The juxtaposition between handmade brick tile and machine bent stainless steel was really this moment that we could celebrate on the exterior of the home. The home is tucked really tight to the ground. It's designed to only be one step up into the home, so that required us to bring grade up really high. And in some areas, you'll see the shingle floats just an inch or sometimes even less above that crushed stone. So it makes a really big difference when you're protecting the home with that stone base. That grade being just a step down really makes the indoor-outdoor living really special and really comfortable. And the two pavilions on the either end of the home are completely flush with the interior. So on the interior, you have these beautiful white oak floors, and there's a lift slide door that opens up. You're stepping right onto the deck. And the deck is actually a Thermary product. It is a really wide plank spruce board. And spruce is typically not a product that you would see outside used, especially as decking. But the thermally modified process makes it a really stable option where this material will last 30+ years. You can stain it, you can oil it, or you could leave it natural to silver. And our intent here was We want the product to silver. We opted to put one coat of oil to extend that life of the wood. On the front deck, you'll actually see the silvering happening a lot faster, where on the two pavilions, because they're covered, that silvering process is going to be a lot slower. And you'll see that same thermary product used on the entryway, where we have the recessed entry and the walls on either side. We have this entry door that is completely clad and almost hidden out of sight with the exception of the door handle. And same thing with the bench on the outdoor living space. It's all clad in that thermary product with a nice cushion. And then the outdoor kitchen. And that outdoor kitchen has the marble that matches the inside of the home, but also has the thermary that clads all of the cabinetry on the outside, which features a Kenyan electric grill and then an outdoor sink with a custom-made faucet. I've always envisioned that space to be used really as much as weather would allow. You open up the kitchen, whether you're cooking inside or cooking outside, it becomes another dining space. The outdoor living space actually sits above indoor living space. We ended up extending the basement underneath there to create additional living space. And doing that, we knew that we essentially had to build a roof over the top of that. Being that we were going to be installing a deck, it really felt like it was our job to do something that was above and beyond what would be considered typical. We end up doing a completely liquid applied waterproofing system across that entire deck. And we did the same thing on the recessed entryway on the front of the home. And that was to create this really long lasting, durable roof system and really not be concerned with the potential maintenance that might be required if we had done anything else. Out front, we have the staircase that takes you from essentially the street elevation up to your front entry. This is a very monolithic moment where the entire staircase is brick, and then you're reintroduced to that brick in your recessed entryway, and then again when you cross the threshold into the home, where we actually installed that same brick full depth throughout the entire entry and mudroom space. And that brick is from Orca, and the reason we end up working with them is that we needed a thin brick material, but also a paver format brick. What I like about the detailing on that staircase specifically is, number one, the handrail. And the handrail was fabricated by our trade partner, Rich Costa. He built this in one piece and really took the time to understand what it would look like on site and how it would interact with the brick coursing. The bottom plate is exactly one course of a brick wide, but it sits totally flush with the adjacent bricks. And then you have these thin pickets that are continuous all the way down with no newel post on either end. Rich was really creative and he tied it back to the planter at the very top of the stairs for rigidity. He also used one of the pickets to run a hidden wire up that allows us to tie in this hidden light channel that he machined into the bottom of the top rail, which at night creates this really, really beautiful light effect. When you come up to the very top of those stairs, the interaction between the brick and the deck is similar to how many spaces are in the home, where you have two dissimilar materials spaced slightly apart, but completely flush with one another. So when you're looking above, you have this very square deck, and then the staircase almost comes up and is intersected by that deck. That corner became a really long conversation of how it would all come together in the final product. And when you look at the very last two steps, they perfectly align with the corner of the planter on the front, and then you take one step, and then the next step, it aligns perfectly with the back corner of that planter. We're working with fractions of an inch here, so the planter was framed, and then as we're laying out the brick, we realized that we were slightly off. Patrick took the opportunity to reframe that planter, kind of go backwards to make sure that the intent was protected. If you carry that corner all the way back to the home, you see how it intersects the very corner of our cladding on our home, where we have this adjacent window that looks into the living room. One of my favorite points in a project is landscape, and it's really because the home is transitioning from a construction site to a home. The lot size is just under 0.6 acres, but it's really private. When you're on site, you feel as though you're kind of tucked away in the woods. Now, Vincent and his team put together a preliminary landscape plan. We partnered with Michael S. Coffin for the landscape and really leaned into giving him some creative freedom with his team to bring this home to life. Working with him on understanding what plantings should go where, how we would really embody the intent in the planter above the garage, and how we would plant things that as they grew, they would continue to settle the home in a way that felt as though the home was always here. We really were thoughtful in terms of what mature trees we left, what mature landscape we left. This isn't intended to be this perfectly manicured property. It's designed to be natural. It is designed to soften the otherwise hard facade of brick and metal. Michael and his team came in and really understood what we were trying to accomplish. They transformed the entire site from what it was for months and months to what it is today. But two things came up towards the very end of the project. One of them was the driveway. The driveway is small, but there's a lot of space, and it didn't feel right for us to leave it as asphalt. And we end up working with a contractor to do a chip seal finish on it. And they end up laying down a coat of tar and then a very small aggregate that they pounded into the top of the pavement, which gives it this crushed stone look without it being crushed stone. You still have the structural integrity of the asphalt below. But it really, really settled the front in and gave it that natural look like the landscape did. And then nighttime. The home is so beautiful during the day. We felt as though the home needed to continue to have some sort of presence throughout the night. So we ended up partnering with Nightlight Boston. They came in and worked with us and Vincent and put together a landscape lighting plan that was well beyond what we had even intended. They came in and really embodied this idea that the landscape is beautiful and the home is beautiful. Let's highlight all of these things. So they end up installing lighting around the home to highlight the facade, which is really interesting because you go from overhead lighting with the sun to lighting down real low that showcases the facade totally differently. The area that was interesting for me was the planter out front. I had concerns of how we were gonna highlight that at night. They hired a tree climber and he actually hoisted himself up to one of the mature branches on the tree and installed lighting way up there, which was just incredible to watch, but also just this opportunity to understand their commitment to getting it right. When it comes to protecting the architectural vision, the mechanism to doing that is real, true collaboration. Architects and builders oftentimes have this handing of the baton, which is a very real thing when you're designing and building, but there needs to be this link that keeps that process connected. So for us, we would run into things on site, and rather than making the assumption, we would have a conversation in protecting the architecture and our commitment to quality and our commitment to these small moments that, when added up, really results in that, wow, this home feels beautiful. It's a very different looking home. It's more modern than you typically see in this area. But if you're driving by, it's situated on the lot among the landscape in a way that feels natural and feels respectful to the neighborhood. And then when you take a deeper look at it, it still feels respectful, but you start to recognize the differences and the use of materials and the things that make this home special.